Hey everybody, it's Kevin from 3D Printed Props. In today's video, we are going to be working on this just amazingly detailed first blade prop from Supernatural. And if you'd like to print out this file yourself, just head on over to 3dprintedprops.com and hang out to the end of the video to find out how you can get 20% off this incredible file. Okay, so actually these Supernatural weapons were one of the first prints I did on the Phenom L, which I absolutely love. Look at all the things on that bed. So all those weapons from Supernatural have videos on in the coming weeks, and of course you can get them over at the site 3dprintedprops.com. There's a coupon code in the description below to get 20% off. So this is how I clean my prints. Now there's another video you can take a look at where I showed a little bit slower, but what I'm doing is I'm spraying alcohol on these prints and then wiping them down and sort of doing it once or twice or 2 or 3 times actually. And you need to do this with bigger prints. Like, how do you clean something like this that's so huge? You can't put a little pickle container. You've got to have all this area. Now I did make a mistake and I cut the teeth off, the top 2 teeth a little bit, so we'll fix that later. Now I am going to do a little bit of sanding. A lot of times people think resin prints, you don't have to sand. Well, there are some layer lines sometimes and you do need to take care of them. Okay, now I use epoxy sculpt. I love this stuff when I make little mistakes like this and I need to add on to a model or sort of take out the lines of a model. Let's say you're putting a figure together and you don't want the lines and the arms. And you can just sculpt the stuff, let it sit for 24 hours, and it hardens right up. It's totally sandable, totally paintable. And again, I use this stuff all the time with mistakes. And again, by the time you're done with it and you're smoothing it out, you don't even know that it was added on. And there you go. As you can see, you'd be hard pressed to know that I added something there. It looks a little rough, but once I sand it down, you won't even be able to tell. Now we'll take a look at a reference. I always use a reference, and I start with a sort of an ivory paint that I love that I need to get more of. You can see it's gone. And this is just cheap acrylics. If you want to know what I use, it's in the description below. I don't buy anything fancy when I'm painting models like this or props like this. Cheap acrylic paint works perfectly, and it is cheap. So I'm going to give this all a base coat. Now, the thing I love about painting a model like this that's so distressed is you're building up layers. So don't think you're just going to bang this out in one sort of print, one sort of paint and just get this effect. You really need to work at it to sort of build up these layers, and don't get discouraged, because there were a few times in this where I was like, oh, I'm just not getting it, because you might be looking at this sort of burnt umber and saying, I don't see this color at all in the model. But you have to start thinking like, let's see, this thing is an ancient bone, it's gone over all this time. Where does the wear show? Even if you're not going, faithfully off of a reference, like that's just something I found someone did that looked really good. I liked the paint job and I sort of wanted to do something like that. But you're gonna build up your shades. So I started out with a lighter shade, and then I sort of went to a darker shade in the middle. And again, the middle is going to be darker because of course it's sort of concave and it's going to hold the dirt, just like all the cracks and stuff are going to hold the dirt. So I'm making sure to go back over the teeth like this with a darker color, because there would be gunk and grime in there over the ages. Again, this thing is like 1,000 years old. And now I'm looking at it and it's a little too light still. So this is almost like a wash. So it's a lot of water and a little bit of paint. So this way it isn't totally painting over it. You can still see that ivory through, but it's a wash. Again, I didn't think it was dark enough, so I went ahead and I'm adding more and more. And you can see how it shows the texture in those teeth. And again, I'm looking at this at first and I'm like, geez, I don't know if I'm happy with this. Just keep painting and you will start to see what you're looking for emerge. You can get really discouraged when you're trying to build up something like this. Just have fun with it and work on building up those layers. So again, cracks and crevices, they're going to hold the most dirt. So I'm going to make sure that these little dots and these little grooves that are painted in or carved in, they are going to get a lot of wear and a lot of black in there. Now, if you're not happy with how much pigment you put down, get out a cloth like I've got right there, and I'm just wiping it down. And again, I'm looking at the shape of the weapon itself to see where everything's going to show up, like where would grime show up, but at the same time also where would highlights show up, where would whites show up. And again, I just gave that another wash of a lot of water with a little bit of paint to, you know, sort of orangey yellow it up a little bit. And again, you just wipe some stuff off here and there. And I noticed it's looking a little too yellow, so now I'm just sort of using the cloth and wiping away paint. So sometimes you're going to add paint, sometimes you're going to wipe it away. Don't wipe too much away, or you never, you know, you're never going to finish. But on those highlight areas, I've got a clean cloth now, and I'm just wiping that away. And then I think I did go a little too far with wiping it away, and I'm going to go back and add some a little bit later. So this is starting to turn out like I like it. A lot of it has to do with just the amazing detail on this model as well. All these cracks and crevices, they really hold the paint and really make it look like it's something. So there you go. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now I'm sort of just dabbing colors because I want textures, and that's what something like this is about. Now if I just sort of used you know, the cloth and was wiping up and down, I'm going to get streaks. But if I dab it, like I crumble it up and I dab that cloth with a pigment, I'm going to get sort of like more mottled splotches, and that's kind of what you want. Again, you're building up a texture. And again, since there's such deep crevices in here, it really holds that really well, and the texture really comes out. Again, really super happy with how this model turned out. This is of course the first blade from Supernatural. It was the weapon Cain used to kill his brother Abel in the television show, and what Dean ended up using and when he had the mark of Cain. So there it is. One side done. Really happy with it. Still going to use a little bit of work. Now we got to do the other side, but I won't film that because we already saw I did this side. I just did it on the other. Now for the black straps, and you know, I decided to go ahead and let the bone color just go over that. It was no big deal. Why try to get it close when you know, I'm just going to paint over it anyway. The black handle, the leather handle, really turned out well with this black paint. I was really happy with how this was turning out. I like the texture of the paint. Yeah, I wouldn't want to spray paint something like this. Texture again is really key when you're trying to get that aged and sort of distressed look. Now again, this is something I talked about earlier. When you're building up color, sometimes you need to look at the model and see where would it wear. Now, like here's the teeth. I wanted some of those to be a little shinier because those might be something that would wear on the thing you're killing, or it would wear in the case it was in, and it would also make them look a little bit more teeth-like. So I'm just wetting the cloth and then I'm wiping it away, and that's a lot easier to get that look by actually doing what would happen, the wearing, the wiping. To just try to paint more lighter color on there, it wouldn't look as natural as it does when you just use a wet cloth to take that stuff down. And again, I'm just going to do that over some of the other areas. And you know, this is probably one of the neatest paint jobs I've done. I've been I don't mean neat as in tidy, I mean neat as in the old-fashioned way people would say, that's neat. But I just really love this paint job. I'll say it myself. I really dig it. And again, I'm just wearing away at more of the paint and taking it down so it looks a little bit more natural on the wear lines. Like if you had that in a pouch or something like that, the highlights would be lighter. So I went ahead and modeled the case, and I'm just giving a little bit of a sanding where there were some supports and where I had some resin run where I didn't sort of clean it well enough. Put some glue on it, drop that down on there, and you can see how it's sort of sinking a little bit because this is all hollow. You don't ever want to paint something like that as a solid piece of resin. And I'm just going to go ahead and give it a matte black paint job, and then go ahead and do some gilding, some gold. Now this is really a gold rub and buff with a little bit of what's that called, airbrush thinner, to make it runny, a little bit runnier, so I can paint with it. Because the reference that I saw from the show had that sort of gilt sort of look to it, and I thought this would look a lot neater and cooler than if I just used gold paint. And it did. It had this really nice sort of glistening look. Really happy with all of this and how it came out. So this was one of my favorite paint jobs. I think I say that a lot. I think every new paint job is my favorite paint job. I learn a little bit more and I get a little bit better But I tell you, I just love how natural this thing looks. Now again, if you want to print this out yourself, you can head over to my site, 3dprintedprops.com, and if you want to take 20% off, just go in the description below and you'll find a coupon code that you can use to get this even cheaper. And now, and again, it comes with the stand, and again, real fun, real easy to print, and super easy to paint. If you are interested in any of the paints that I use, go ahead and click on the links below in the description. They are affiliate links to help out the channel a little bit, some money for more resin. If you liked the video, please click like and subscribe. Subscribers help out the channel. We just hit 6,000 subscribers. All I can say is thank you. Thank you for watching the videos. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and maybe click subscribe. And then this way we'll hit that next big number. Who knows what it'll be. I would assume 7,000. I'm only guessing. And then 8, and then 9, then 10. We can only hope, right? We'll see. All right, guys, take it easy. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.